Good evening and welcome to Kaufman Corner, a Kansas City Royals podcast. With you, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, co-author of Rob and Rany on the Royals. Rany on the Royals, he's written for The Ringer, he's written for The Athletic. He's a big deal, people. Just trust me on that one. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Let's talk some Royals baseball. First of all, let's say happy birthday, America, as in some places we're already there. I know I've been looking all over the world. We have countries chiming in. So do our armed forces. I think there's probably a lot of, Kansas Cityans that are in the armed forces that are all over the world. I'll bet you that's a lot of the people I see in some of these foreign countries. It's already July 4th in a number of those places. So happy birthday, America. Happy July 4th. And hopefully everybody's already off to a great weekend and has a great 4th of July on Monday. Rany, certainly I hope your weekend is going well. And for the Royals this week, come on, 500 baseball. I saw you tweeting about it. I know you're excited about this.
You know me, the eternal optimist. In fact, you might hear fireworks off in the distance behind me celebrating the Royals' 500 week.
That's right.
Either that or America's birthday, one or the other. So that is the good news. The Royals win 500, and in fact, this is the third straight week that the Royals have gone 3-3. I'm counting a week as the baseball week, Monday to Sunday.
Right.
3 straight weeks of 500. That's the good news. The bad news is, do you know the last time this season the Royals had a winning record in a calendar week?
I don't.
It's a trick question. They haven't.
Okay.
I mean, technically, the season started on a Thursday, so if you count Thursday to Sunday, the Royals went 2-1 in their opening series. So technically, that was a winning week on the Monday to Sunday scale. But they have not had a 4-win week. They have not won 4 games in a week all season long. They've not done that.
That's not easy to do, by the way.
I know. I mean, you would think just randomly they would have a winning record. We're talking about 7 games at most, 4-2 or 4-3. They have not done that in a week all season. So 500 is the best we can ask for, and that's an accomplishment. They're 9-9 in the last 3 weeks. On the other hand, their schedule has been fairly easy of late. They just finished 9 games against the A's, the Rangers, and the Tigers, and they went 4-5 in those 9 games as a whole. So I'm not really sure we're seeing progress in that front, but as Royals fans, we take our victories where we can find them. So, we a little Vinny Pasquantino action going on. Jackson Kowar hasn't completely embarrassed himself out of the bullpen. These are small victories that we can hang our hat on right now.
Yeah, but isn't that where we are? Is in the small victories? Like, let me ask you this. I mean, we're pointing it out. We're noting what the record is, but is there a sense in your mind that they're turning a corner?
I think. I would argue offensively, I think they're in a decent place right now because, kind of quietly, they are integrating a lot of young players, a lot of rookies into their everyday lineup, and it's not suffering. I mean, right now the Royals have 1/3 of their lineup are guys who made their major league debut this season: Bobby Witt, MJ Melendez, and now Pasquantino. Edward Olivares is not technically a rookie, but only barely so, and he's playing a lot. So you're seeing a lot of these younger guys play, and whether it's regression to the mean or it's Alex Zumwalt magic, I don't know. But the offense has actually been surprisingly respectable over the last 6 weeks or so. It's still the pitching, and even today, Brady Singer was cruising for 4 innings. And can't get through the 5th inning, can't qualify for the win. And the Royals want to get that win. They're wedded to that statistic from 1876. They wanted to get the 5 innings, and he couldn't even get there. And gave up 4 runs. They gave up 4 runs yesterday. Lost, gave back-to-back home runs in the 9th inning to lose the game to a Detroit Tigers team, which is kind of quietly one of the worst offenses we have seen in the last 50 years. Yeah. It's really astounding. I mean, they're averaging, I think after today, exactly 3 runs per game, which is that's like 1968 baseball right there. That's not something you or I think, have ever seen before.
Well, and really, shouldn't the Tigers be a little bit of the guide for the Kansas City Royals? I remember when the Tigers signed the Miguel Cabrera contract, and I think it was in between his 2 MVP years. Or maybe right after or right before his Triple Crown year. But I'm like, I said at the time, I'm like, the back end of this deal is going to look horrific. It's going to be awful. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. The Rays seem to have no interest in anybody finishing their career in a Rays uniform because they know your final years are your worst years, right? So they move guys. Like, that's the mindset. There's a little bit of Carl Peterson with the Salvador Perez contract. Like, when you see that deal being put out, it's like, hey, I drafted these guys. They're Hall of Famers, or they're at least Ring of Honor guys for the Chiefs. In the Royals case, Royals Hall of Famers. And I'm going to make sure they stay a Royal. That's a false trophy. Right? I'll quote my friend Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, who I heard coin that phrase. Competing for false trophies will destroy you every time. And that's what they're doing. They by signing Salvador Perez, making sure he's going to finish in a Royals uniform, they're saying, okay, and making his contract such that it really gets difficult to trade him. They're more interested in him finishing as a Royal. They're more interested in his candidacy for the Royals Hall of Fame than they are building a championship ball club. And there's numerous cases, Miguel Cabrera being one that's right there in your own division, of contracts that should not be handed out. Your biggest money deals should not be handed out to guys who have a 3 in the front of their age.
Right. I mean, well, and certainly a contract that goes through a year that has a 4 at the end of your age. Because Miguel Cabrera, I think he still has one more year. Yeah, one more year. He'll be 40 next year. But giving a contract to a guy that ends when he is 40, unless he's 39 and a half when he signs it, probably a bad idea. And, what you say about Salvador Perez, there's certainly some truth to that in the sense that having him under contract complicates what the Royals do, because having a catcher, especially in his early to mid 30s, those catchers can age very rapidly. At a moment's notice, they can lose their skills. And also, there isn't really much of a fallback plan if a catcher loses the ability either to hit or to catch. But the Tigers are kind of a cautionary tale in another way. I mean, the Miguel Cabrera contract certainly they're paying for now, but at the very least, they probably got some value out of it in the early years when they were competitive, when they were contenders. And I mean, you're talking about an inner circle Hall of Famer, the only guy of our lifetime to win a Triple Crown. I mean, a truly elite player. It was a mistake. And smart people were saying that at the time, that it was way too much money for way too many years. And he's been kind of an albatross for the last couple of years, but at least it wasn't like the Albert Pujols contract, where really after the first year he was barely worth playing, let alone worth one of the biggest contracts in the game. But when you look at the Tigers, to me right now, the issue isn't the Miguel Cabrera contract. That was a decision made years ago. If you're a Tigers fan, the thing that's got to be terrifying you is the Javier Baez contract, because this is the first year of that contract, a 6-year deal for a guy who's only 29 years old. You say, okay, he's young, but sometimes guys peak in their mid to late 20s, and he may be on the downslope. And I mean, coming in today, hitting 211, 249, 366. This is a guy who has, his weakness has always been plate discipline, and he's being exposed right now, and he's under contract for 5 more years after this one at over $20 million a year. I think he'll be better than he's been so far, but Javier Baez in his first year as a Tiger is already somebody that they have to be really concerned about, and they're giving him a lot of money. The thing about Salvador Perez is the Royals knew him, and they gave him the money anyway. And my point there is there are studies that have shown that players who are approaching free agency, who get long-term contracts from the team they're already on, tend to age better than players that go out on the free agent market or sign somewhere else. Like, teams know their own players. They know which guys are likely. They have the work ethic to age more gracefully. And the fact that the Royals gave Salvi that contract is on some level a vote of confidence that he's, taking good care of his body and is probably less likely to deteriorate than somebody they had signed off the free agent market.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And listen, and hopefully the Salvador Perez contract works out. But if you're going to play the math, you shouldn't be doing it. And I just think the Tigers right now, the fact that the Tigers are who the Royals are playing, that cautionary tale is there for them. The Royals very quickly are going to have an opportunity to, again, add to the ball club. They hold the 9th overall pick in the draft. We're now less than 2 weeks away. 2 weeks from right now, we will know who they took with the 9th pick. What should the strategy be for the Royals? I can tell you what I think it should be. What do you think it should be coming into this? And do you have a guy that you're in love with that you say, this is the guy I want to see him take at number 9?
To me, the strategy here, it can be summed up in 2 words, which is be flexible. And the reason I say that is this is one of the most unsettled top of the drafts that I can recall in the last 20 years, in that there are a half dozen guys that the Orioles plausibly might take with the number one pick right now, that would be reasonable choices with that pick. And there's it's a really good year, I think, to be picking ninth, because there's like 4 or 5 different guys who project as top 5 players who might drop depending on the way the draft falls all the way to number 9. So I would say the one thing the Royals cannot do is to get fixated on a specific player that they think will definitely be there. And if somebody, I don't think Drew Jones is going to be there at number 9, but if Tremar Johnson or Cam Collier, some of these guys who are expected to go into maybe the number 4 to number 7 range, but there's certainly a scenario in which the teams drafting at that point just have a specific other player at the top of their draft board. If those guys fall, you have to be willing to change your strategy. When we look about what the Royals did last year, taking Frank Mazzucato, complete wild card, and I believe that the reports are that they would not necessarily have taken him had the draft fallen a different way. There's a shortstop, and I'm trying to remember exactly who it was that they were going to take, the guy who ended up going with the 6th overall pick. The rumor was that they were interested in drafting him if he had been available. And so this was sort of their plan B. I'm not sure I agree with the strategy, specifically for Mazzucato. He has not performed that great right now. Jordan Lawler, there's the name I'm looking for. He went 6th to the Diamondbacks. The Royals might have taken him, but that would have completely changed their strategy, because you would have spent a ton of money on that guy. You probably wouldn't have taken Ben Kudner with the 2nd round pick, Shane Panzini. The strategy would have been totally different. And whether or not I agree with what the strategy they ultimately chose, the way the draft fell, if they were prepared, if they had multiple draft trees, depending on who fell to them with the first pick, that's great. That's what you want. You want to take what the draft gives you. We can go into some of the specifics about the players now, but I think that's just the number one key. If the Royals are like, we're taking this guy, he's our guy no matter what, they risk blowing a really good opportunity if somebody falls to them.
Should we be terrified that it's 8 hitters in a row, and then at 9, most things have them taking a hitter, whether it's Carl Crawford's kid, which is kind of a Mazzucato strategy. I think everybody's just looking at what they did last year and saying, okay, the Royals, they like to do this. And listen, they've done it before too. As we know, that's how
Dozier and Manaea.
Yeah, Dozier and Manaea came together. So I can see, it's probably, as you said, if they have multiple strategies, it's probably one of the strategies they have up there on their board is there is a guy that they'll take that they figure they can sign quickly, cheap, and then they'll blow extra money on somebody in the next round or in other successive rounds, because there was the catcher from NC State was above slot as well. So they splashed that money around in other places. But can they really take pitching again? Or is the fear of them, by the way, I can update everybody if you'd like to know where we sit with the 3 pitchers that they took last year on their walks per inning and such. Frank Mazzucato, who, again, all of these guys were hidden for 11 months away from the eye of anybody with no statistics able to be accumulated, in theory, because they were going to make them more ready to compete. Frank Mazzucato has a 6.26 ERA in 23 innings. He's given up 23 hits, 17 runs. He's walked 19 in 23 innings and struck out 29. Ben Kudner, whichever it is, when I keep hearing both, he's fared better, 0-3 with a 2.33 ERA, 27 innings, 23 hits, only 9 runs allowed, 7 earned. He, though, has walked 14 in 27 innings with 29 strikeouts. And Shane Panzini, the other one of the bunch, 0-1 with the 3.57, 22 2/3, 16 hits. He has walked 17 and 22 2/3 and struck out only 21, which means that the 3.57, I'm not looking at one of the things that has a FIP. His FIP would blow. Like this is a coincidence that the ERA isn't higher when you see those numbers, which is amazing because of the Royals preaching first pitch strikes and all this stuff. And these guys are walk machines. They're walk factories after 11 months.
Well, if they can't get the Royals at the major league level to throw first
Right.
pitch strikes. I'm hardly going to hold A-ball pitchers to account for that.
Well,
But yes,
I mean,
this is an organization-wide problem. Is the walks? I mean,
it
we
is,
can get into
but
that too.
it is actually the first line of defense for Cal Eldred. I mentioned his name, and I will continue to mention his name for Cal Eldred because I mean, you're seeing they don't draft guys that can throw strikes. They don't,
or they just can't teach control to guys in the minor leagues. One or the other.
And then they unleash them, and then they think it's all going to come together when they get to the big league level, or they leave them down where they're beyond the league's ability, so they look good statistically speaking, and then they get to the big leagues and they really don't have the ability to get it done. Anyway, my point is, like, I'm terrified they'll take pitching, but then I'm also terrified that, well, if 8 hitters come off, probably pitcher, I can see most years like getting the best pitcher in a draft class at pick number 9 would seem like a good strategy, but I'm terrified of the Royals making that move. And a lot of people, and again, maybe it's just their past history. They're like, well, no one should take a pitcher for 20 picks, but if anyone's going to do it, it'll be this club. I live in terror of this draft.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of upset with you for bringing this up because that's exactly what I was going to say, which is this draft is sort of uniquely top heavy with hitters, right? And almost every draft result has, like you said, the first 8 guys going being hitters. And in a sort of, all things equal, would you rather have the 9th best hitter in the draft or the number 1 pitcher? Like, if you could say it with the 9th pick in the draft, you're going to get the number 1 pitcher in the draft, even given the natural attrition rate of pitchers and the increased riskiness, that is the one scenario in which you're like, you know what, maybe we do take a pitcher here. But the problem is twofold. One is, like I said, the problem isn't just that there's a lot of hitters in this draft, but nobody seems to actually like the pitchers. According to MLB.com, the top 10 players available, not a mock draft where they're just predicting where guys will go, but if you're ranking them in terms of where they should go, the top 10 players in this draft are all hitters. According to Keith Law, it's actually the top 15. And Keith he comes from the Baseball Prospectus school, of course, as do I, and he's going to be a little bit more skeptical of pitchers. But still, top 15.
Yeah,
I don't have Baseball America's numbers here, but I'm sure it's very similar.
Let me add to that. I spoke to Keith Law a couple of weeks ago, and kind of were previewing the draft, and I said, listen, they haven't gone. They've gone pitcher, and he said, well, you'll have a story if they go pitcher at 9 because there shouldn't be. Or no, maybe it was Jeff Passan who said, believe me, the Royals are going to take a hitter at 9 because nobody should be taking a pitcher in like the first 20 picks. And maybe I'm getting it wrong. Maybe it was 15.
Was he saying in any draft or specifically this draft?
This draft.
Okay.
That like the word is that it's hitter through like the first half of the draft. But I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't have any confidence. I mean,
right. I'm looking at Baseball America. I found it's top 11 is all hitters. And what happened is there were a lot of like very interesting pitchers going into the college
they all got hurt
baseball season, and they all got hurt. All these guys have had Tommy John surgery. So yeah, I think if you're a Royals fan, what you have to hope for is that one of these 5 or 6 sort of clear top of the draft hitters falls for whatever reason. Some of the teams in front of them decide to cut underslot deals, save money for their other picks. If one of these guys falls, and a month ago there was I think you could have hoped that Cam Collier, who is a really unique player because he is a junior college player, but essentially graduated high school 2 years early and went off to junior college at the age of 17. And if this sounds familiar, that's because it's exactly what Bryce Harper did like 12 years ago. And Bryce Harper was a 17-year-old who had some of the best numbers against in college you'll ever see. Cam Collier is not Bryce Harper, but it's the same idea. 17 years old, and dominating in junior college, and actually briefly played in the Cape Cod League and looked good. The problem is I think he's looked so good that it seems unlikely he will fall now to number 9. The Pirates might take him as high as number 4. But if he were to fall, Termarr Johnson, who is a high school, he's a shortstop now. Everyone assumes he'll move to second base. Not maybe elite power, but I've heard him described as having one of the best hit tools of any high school player in like 10 years. And I've seen a lot of comps. The comp I'm going to put on him, which might sound a little weird, is a better version of Howie Kendrick. If you remember,
Yeah.
Howie Kendrick came up was like an 11th round pick. Was a kind of I think came out of a small high school, not a big physical guy. Was overlooked in the draft, and just like hit 340, 350 in the minor leagues, and ended up having a very long, productive career. In never hit for a ton of power, but had like a lifetime average of like 295. Was a really, really good player. I really liked Howie Kendrick as a player. Termarr Johnson could be that with maybe a little bit more power. As a second baseman, that's a guy I would love to have. He might fall, but again, there's actually rumors that the Orioles might take him number 1 overall because they can cut a deal for him. So there's so much fluidity here that the Royals have to be prepared to, go in any direction. Like they should not be writing anybody off their draft board. But if all of the guys at the clear top of the draft are taken, and you're looking at the guy who's on your list is the 8th or 9th best hitter or a pitcher, then you have some tough decisions to make. Because, of course, the other issue you and I have here is that we just have no confidence in the Royals to develop pitching. I mean, if they can't develop Asa Lacy, who is, a far better prospect coming out of the draft than anybody available in this year's draft, what confidence do we have that they're going to develop, whether it's Brock Porter, who's a high school pitcher from Michigan. Dylan Lesko is a guy who's really interesting. He's the high school guy who had Tommy John surgery. But before Tommy John surgery, he was being talked about as one of the best high school arms of the last 10 years. I'd rather almost go that route. The comp there is Lucas Giolito, who had an arm injury in high school, didn't have Tommy John in high school, but fell to like 16th. The Nationals, who had already taken Harper and Strasburg and Anthony Rendon in the 3 previous drafts, were like, hell yeah, we'll take this guy who was a potential number 1 pick before his arm injury showed up. He lasted 1 inning in rookie ball before he blew out his arm and had Tommy John. But Lucas Giolito was turned into a very, a very respectable guy. They probably honestly undersold on him when they traded him to the White Sox to get, I believe it was Adam Eaton that they got. But Adam Eaton was, a part of that, their championship run there. So yeah, I mean, to me, Dylan Lesko would be a really interesting guy to consider. But any of those guys that you're looking at, it only makes sense if you can get something done under slot and then allow you to use your other picks. Because remember, this year, the Royals have a supplemental first. They always get a competitive balance pick, but every other year, it's a second round pick last year. This year, it's a first round pick. So they have number 9, but they also have number 35 and number 49. And you really have to look at those 3 picks together, because at 35, there's a chance they could get somebody who's a top 15, top 20 pick that they can get to fall to them if they can pay a lot more than slot.
Yeah. If they've taken somebody lesser at pick number 9 and they have the extra money to go there, that is one strategy. And a lot of people when are trying to project, and I think that's why Carl Crawford's kid is put there a lot, because that's a guy that he fits their mold. Obviously, Carl Crawford is going to be an athletic kid and all those kind of things. I'll say this. I mean, they have to get it right. They've just had too many things that they've gotten wrong. And listen, if you're Scott Boras or any power agent, why would you take, if you're a pitcher, why would you sign with the Royals? I mean, if you really believe you're good and your arm isn't barking at you already, why wouldn't you, if you're drafted by the Royals, go to college? Why wouldn't you say, I want way over slot? I mean, what have they done pitching wise that you can say, like, yeah, this guy's career is going to work out with the Kansas City Royals? And I don't say that to be mean, and I'm not saying it to be flippant or shock jockish, but if I were the agent for a pitcher and the Royals were talking about taking my guy, like, hey, this is what we want to do, and what are you feeling money wise? I'd be like, yeah, I need $1 billion. Like, we're not signing with you. Don't draft my guy, because you can't develop pitching. Like, at what point does their reputation precede them when it comes to dealing with agents in the draft?
It's a really good question. And this kind of it kind of reminds me of what the Royals were like in the immediate aftermath of the Allard Baird era, where, the assumption that Royals fans had was that they'll just never be able to draft a Scott Boras client because, they've never had success in signing his guys in the past. But the difference then was you had a completely new front office in place that Dayton Moore, to his credit, had gotten ownership to completely change the way they looked at the draft. And so they were able to go into the first Dayton Moore draft and take Mike Moustakas, Boris client, and get him signed, and then take Eric Hosmer the following year. But of course, Mike Moustakas signed so close to the deadline that I think Joe Posnanski had 2 columns ready to go the next day, one of which was in the event Mike Moustakas did not sign. And Eric Hosmer actually probably signed after midnight on the deadline, which we know because Pedro Alvarez,
Right.
you may recall this, ended up being a dispute with the Pirates, and Hosmer's name got sort of thrown in there that technically the paperwork didn't come through until midnight, but it all kind of worked out in the end. So, but even then, that was more just an issue of money being spent, right? We want X number of dollars. If you give it to us, we'll sign, but we just don't think that you're willing to do that. This is something different where it's not about the money. It's actually about developing my talent. If I had a son who was a, potential first round pick out of high school in this draft and the Royals drafted him, you would have to think long and hard about, is this an organization that's going to develop his talents, like he would for another 29 teams. I think the way you want to look at this is, especially if you're a high school guy, but even a college guy, it's going to be 2 or 3 years before you reach the major leagues. And you have to think that in 2 or 3 years, either the Royals have figured out whatever it is that is hindering their pitching development, or there's going to be a complete front office, overhaul. I mean, the player development in baseball takes so long that trying to predict who's, whether or not your player is going to develop in 2 or 3 years, the organization could look completely different. This is not like football where you're expected to contribute right away. So I think that would be the saving grace as a Royals fan if they do draft one of these guys. I think they're going to sign. But at the same time, the Royals are going to gauge that interest very carefully. And we know the Royals are not at all averse to just skipping over a player if they think there's any doubt that he might not sign with them.
Yeah. By the way, I was looking back. It's always fun to just click the WAR tab on Baseball Reference on a draft and see, well, did they get the right guy? Right? Did he slot out? Mike Moustakas, who they took number 2, 8th in WAR, just amongst first round picks. Right? There's maybe other guys later in the draft, but he went second. The best in that draft was Josh Donaldson, followed by Madison Bumgarner. Donaldson, who went 48th. Bumgarner went 10th. David Price went 1, so that's okay. Jason Hayward, 14. Todd Frazier, 34. Rick Porcello, 27. Matt Wieters, 5. All ended up producing more value than Mike Moustakas.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine if Madison Bumgarner or Rick Porcello, high school pitchers, if the Royals had drafted them, do you really have any confidence they would have developed?
No, I have none. I have absolutely none. And part of the reason is because of that. They can't identify him.
Right. And I will say
they can't identify Clayton Kershaw because they took Luke Hochevar ahead of Clayton Kershaw. So no, I have no confidence whatsoever. But I'm pointing out why I have no confidence.
Well, and this gets back to, even if all the guys that are drafted ahead of them are hitters, they take a hitter. Because if there is one strength in the organizational development right now, it is that I do think that they at least can point to success stories on the hitting side of the operation. And we're seeing that with a guy like Pasquantino right now. So the best draft picks that this front office has had, Moustakas, Hosmer, Will Myers, these are guys who are all hitters, mostly high school, but not all. And yeah, I think when you consider this team's track record, using a number 9 overall pick is on a pitcher is it's a massive risk.
Spencer put up here, and there's been a couple other people that have mentioned this name, so I want to put it up here. I'll never forgive the Royals for not taking Brady House, a 6'4" monster at 18, future third baseman, will haunt the team for years and last year's. Now, he signed for $5 million at pick number 11 with the Nationals. The Royals signed Frank Mazzucato for $3.5 million, and then spent about $3 million on Ben Cadorna. So that's where the 6.5, they wouldn't have been able to take Cadorna, obviously, and probably not the catcher who's doing all right from NC State, and probably a couple other guys I'd have to be reminded of who were over slot signings for the Royals last year. But that is the name that a lot of people say, okay, this is the guy.
Right.
Right.
Well, we talked about both him and Khalil Watson earlier this season. I will say I'm looking them up now. Brady House, I mean, because both of them were just like hit the ground running. They were both like hitting well over 300 in April. Brady House is hitting 278 with 3 home runs all season, a 375 slugging in A ball. Khalil Watson, after just destroying the ball for 3 weeks, is hitting 221 with a 372 slug. Now, they're both 19-year-old hitters in A ball. I would still have more confidence in them, becoming major leaguers than Frank Mazzucato at this point. But, 2 months ago, they were kind of on a superstar trajectory, and that might have just been a small sample size. So we'll see. I agree. I would have rather had both of those guys, especially Watson, because he only ended up signing for, I think, 4.4. And I really think the Royals could have probably signed him and still taken Kuderna, who might end up being the jewel of that draft.
So you gave a bunch of options. Do you have a guy that you say, this is what I'm really hoping happens? And even if it's a pipe dream, one of the guys that you think is probably going to go 3, 4, or 5, but maybe there's some scenario where he slides.
So Cam Collier is kind of that guy for me. Like I said, a month ago, I was really hoping he would fall, and there's still a chance he does. I just think to draft a 17-year-old who can hit, he's a third baseman now, but probably has the ability, you could move him to a corner outfield, and I think he would be great in that role. That's probably the dream option. There is a chance Elijah Green, who is sort of just a tooled up monster, which, given our experience, Bubba Starling may not be a good thing, but was a guy talked about as a potential number 1 overall pick before the season, and is still ranked in the top 5. But like, I could see a situation where maybe he drops. I don't expect either of those things. But can I throw a sort of, not exactly a prediction, but I want to do that Brian Windhorst thing where it's like, he just starts throwing questions and, conspiracy theory of, why would the Royals do this? Why would the Royals do that? What would the Royals have done 16 years ago when there was no clear number 1 pick in the draft? They took a pitcher who came out of college and didn't sign as a junior, and then went and played an independent ball and reestablished himself.
You're talking about Aaron Crow?
No, I'm talking about Luke Hochevar.
Right? Okay.
Well, who's that guy in this draft?
Well, it's Kumar Rocker.
It's Kumar Rocker. Kumar Rocker, who the Mets didn't sign last year because he signed his physical.
And who most people think was what had Dane Moore was all fired up that night after they made the pick and was on a Zoom. And, the thought process was that he had tried to get the deal done, get the parameters done with Kumar Rocker, couldn't do it. And that's when he threw his hands up and went for Mazzucato. And
I think there's a strong possibility that happened.
Yeah.
I think the Royals liked Kumar Rocker as a talent. He wanted $6 million, or at least that's what the Mets were prepared to offer him. Then he failed his physical, and they just withdrew the offer. They just said, at any price, we would rather have the 11th pick in the draft next year than sign him. And that, in fact, that's one of the, I think the new rules in the CBA is that you have to offer a player, like I think at least 75 or 80% of his slot value, assuming he has passed his pre-draft physical. And I think Kumar Rocker had not provided all of his medicals. We know now, in fact, just this week, that Kumar Rocker had some sort of minor shoulder surgery last fall. There was something structurally wrong. They're saying it's not his labrum, not his rotator cuff, and presumably teams have all of his medical records. So there is some transparency about exactly what was going on. But he is back pitching in independent ball. He made 5 starts. I believe he's shutting down now, but he just made his last start and looked very good, upper 90s. His fastball, the fastball, I heard the movement. He doesn't have great movement on it, but the fastball has great velocity. And his slider was, his pitch in college that just made him such a monster. The talent is there, and there's a couple ways the Royals could go here. They could take him with the 9th pick, and maybe presumably if they get him to sign to under slot, because right now the word is he's probably going in the middle to the back half of the first round. That is a possibility. What I will predict here is that the Royals will instead take someone else If one of those elite guys does not fall to them, they'll take an underslot guy, probably possibly Justin Crawford, which we talked about, Carl Crawford's son. And I mean, you talk about players that
Well, I
were
just
tailor
put up.
made.
Spencer said, if he had more of a bat, I'd be all about it. But likely a Billy Hamilton type.
Well, that is the
Not
risk there,
here.
right? I mean, I to look back at Carl Crawford. You talk about a player whose talents were just so in the Royals' wheelhouse, and how the Royals did not draft Carl Crawford 23 years ago. They had 4 picks in the first round. Crawford was a second round pick. They took pictures with all 4 of them. I believe it was Jeff Austin, or was that the Mike Stodolko year? That might have Mike Stodolko, Jimmy Gobble, Jay Gerke. Jimmy Gobble was the success there. They somehow passed on Carl Crawford, who would have been the absolute perfect Royal. But maybe they'll make up for it. Take Justin Crawford, get an underslot deal, and then they will, manipulate the draft, make sure Kumar Rocker knows that there's a big paycheck coming his way if he lasts to the 35th pick. And what we saw with Dozier and Manaea back in 2013, that's my wild prediction here, is that the Royals take a guy we're not that thrilled about with their first pick, but then they land Kumar Rocker with their second pick. And say what you want about Kumar Rocker. If you can get Kumar Rocker with the second pick in the draft, your second pick in the draft, that's not a bad strategy. It certainly is a fallback to not getting just a top 5 talent with your first pick.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that draft. It was not. I went back and I clicked on the. Here's the Jimmy Gobble. It was not 2000. Let me see if it's.
No, it's 99, I believe.
Okay. 1999. Let me just double check and make sure that is where Carl Crawford went. Get on the second. Yeah, Carl Crawford, first pick of the second round in 99. And that year, the Royals took in the first round the players they took: Mike McDougal at 25, Jay Gerke at 32, Jimmy Gobble at 43.
There was somebody above that. Wasn't it Jeff Austin or?
I'm sorry. And yes, Kyle Snyder at 7.
Kyle Snyder. Okay.
Kyle Snyder.
There were so many fails, top 10 picks back then. I couldn't keep them all straight. There you go. Yeah. 4 guys, McDougal and Jimmy Gobble, and somehow didn't take the toolsiest high school outfielder.
I think the Royals did take the best pitching coach in that draft. With the 7th pick.
Maybe yes. And they had Kyle Snyder, they had Brian Bannister, and their pitching coaches.
Yeah.
The guy you named earlier.
All right, so we'll see how this ends up playing out. We've got another week to have things start to come together on this one. We did see the debut of Vinny Pasquantino. He is now up. He is a Kansas City Royal. We're getting to see him get his feet wet with the ball club, and the trade deadline right over the horizon. I want to go back to something you said early when we got started, and that is they're inserting some young people, and it's not getting any worse, right? They're playing kind of 500 ball for 3 weeks. I mean, shouldn't that empower them to put the pedal down? We had a question. Where was it? It was a ways back here, but anyway, saying what percentage was it? What percentage would you give that the Royals would trade anyone of note? And I'm sorry, I can't. If whoever sent me that, send it again because it's so far back. I mean, here it is. Spencer said it. He said, "Can you give a percentage number on the chance the Royals trade all tradable pieces? Taylor, Benintendi, Keller, Barlow. I don't know if Dozier and Greinke hold anything. I think they do. I think there's an element of value there with them. But do we have any hope that they're empowered by the performance of the young players, that they will now move every tradable piece, and that Vinny Pasquantino being able to at least, play serviceable ball will empower them to say, okay, we're fine. You bottom out. The 9th pick sucks, by the way, right? It's a terrible spot to be in because the best spot is 1 through 5. And now we know you got to be, there's a lottery even. You can't even guarantee that you're going to have the number 1 pick, but they should be empowered. They pulled off the Carlos Santana deal. Is that going to be what we see? We watch Andrew Benintendi, go by the wayside. Where do you sit on your optimism that they're going to get anything moved?
Well, the odds that they trade all of those guys, Keller and Barlow and Dozier, if they can get, I would say is 0. The Royals are just not built. They don't have the mentality of burn it down and start over from the foundation. But I do.
Can I object to that? Moving relievers is not burning it down.
I agree with you. I'm not saying what they should do. I'm saying this is just not what the Royals will do. I would love to be wrong, but like this goes back to Joaquin Soria 12 years ago when he was the best, one of the 2 or 3 best closers. It was like Rivera and maybe Joe Nathan and Joaquin Soria. Yeah, on a team that was losing 95 games every year, it was such a no-brainer to trade him. They didn't trade him. He blew out his elbow, and he ended up signing for with the Rangers after that. For with no compensation. So no, I don't. I don't have any confidence they will. But yes, should they? If they trade, of all the guys that you mentioned, Barlow would be the one that would impress me the most in the sense of that maybe the Royals have actually learned from the past because Barlow is under contract. I want to say at least 2 years after this one. Like Keller's a free agent after next season. Michael Taylor is a free agent after next season. I'm almost certain Barlow goes through 2024. So for them to trade him would be an acknowledgement, not just that the value you can get for him justifies a short and medium term hit, but also kind of acknowledges that no matter when it comes to relievers, even if you have them under club control for 100 years, the shelf life of even a really good reliever is 2 to 3 years tops.
Right.
I mean, Wade Davis was, a force of nature in 2015. And by 2018, he was barely holding on as like a Rockies closer for, 3 years later.
I'm not going to say that, it's on John Sherman to go tell Dayton Moore, this is what you got to do, because it's not, right? You hire people to do a job or you inherit them and you keep them employed in that job and you let them do the job. When you don't think they can do the job anymore, you make a change. But I'm certain that John Sherman at some point sat in some kind of conversation with people amongst the Guardians when he was a minority owner with the Guardians, where they said, we'll develop more pitching. It's okay. We can move them. They moved guys like who was I don't even remember his name because he immediately fell off a cliff. They moved him to the Cy Young winner. They moved to the Rangers.
Oh, Corey Kluber, right? Yeah,
Corey
that
Kluber.
was right. Great trade. Emmanuel Clase, is it Clase or Clase? I don't know how to say his last name, but he's a dominant reliever. And people thought there was a salary dump. It wasn't. They were just very smart about that.
Well, and I think it's the same thing. Like a starter's a ticking time bomb anyway. You don't have the option to say. It's why the Royals. It's why I keep bringing up all these guys in the minor. Asa Lacy still has only thrown 9 2/3 innings. He is yet to get back on a mound. They can't develop them. They can't keep them healthy. And it's fine. Guys get hurt, but like that. That's why I've said Asa Lacy, Kyle Zimmer, and Luke Hochevar. Those are their 3 top 5 picks as pitchers, right? And I think I'm probably leaving somebody out, but it has not worked.
It's actually worse. It's actually worse than that for Asa Lacy because he has gotten back on a mound. He's been pitching in the complex league, which we thought would be a very brief rehab assignment. In four outings, he's thrown 8 innings. The good news is he's allowed 4 hits. The bad news, 14 walks. Like there's a difference between just like the wildness of youth, what we're seeing with Mazzucato and Cudina and Benzini. That's approaching like Yips territory there, right? That is a mechanical flaw that they need to get fixed. And they might. Will Klein, who's one of their top relief prospects, started the year, gave up like 17 walks in 5 innings, coming back from shin splints, and has managed to get his command under control. So I'm not saying it's fatal, but Asa Lacy, the news just keeps getting worse and worse with him.
Yeah, and throw in the fact that Dayton Moore was quoted as saying when he did his press conference at the the Jewish Community Center here in town, because he has for people that are outside town. His foundation does a lot of things, and he helped build the baseball facility that's there, the baseball and softball facility that's there. So he was doing a press conference, and Todd Lebo was asking him, he's like, "What do you want to know?" I said, "Ask him about Asa Lacy. We want to know where it is." He said, "Well, Asa Lacy is going to be part of a championship staff, starter, reliever. We don't know." And I was like, "No, those are alarm bells."
Yeah,
that is terrifying to hear.
The number 4 overall pick. I don't care if he's a championship reliever. That's not what you were drafting.
And it can't be. It no longer is tough luck. Like when it's Hochevar, Zimmer, Lacy. Like it's not tough luck. You're not good at it. Like the luck is gone. You're 0 for 3. You can't have pitching prospects taken in the top 5 and go 0 for 3. You just can't do it. It's unacceptable. Right. It is. You will not be allowed to draft a pitcher again. So I get back to my point about John Sherman. Listen, you don't have an option as a small market team of saying, because I know we've had a couple people say, well, just don't draft any pitching, go find them along the way. And I know that's what they did with their starting pitching when they won the championship, but the game has evolved. It's moving, and we've talked about this in previous shows, like a rocket, right? Every lesson that the Royals taught has been learned and learned by all the big money teams, and they're playing right back at you. So that idea that you're just going to go get Jeremy Guthrie, Vargas, and Volquez, on a kind of, fairly responsible 2-year deal, it doesn't happen anymore. Like the way you contend consistently as a small market team is you develop pitching. And the Guardians and the Rays have proven it can be done. You don't even have an option about it anymore, right? So, like, you have to trade relievers right now. You have to move them all because it's not even an option that, like, well, we've got 2 more years control. We don't want to give that guy up. Irrelevant. You have to develop them. And if you can't, you're going to be replaced. It's impossible to build a winning team without being able to consistently lock and load high-level relievers on a year in, year out basis as an organization.
Yeah, I would go a step further with what you were talking about the Royals rotation when they didn't want it all. I think you drop Jason Vargas or Jeremy Guthrie or possibly even Volquez in a time machine from 2014 and put them in the majors today, and they would get destroyed. I think the quality of pitching with the tools that teams have now is so much better that a guy who throws 90 without elite command or absolutely elite movement is just going to get waxed. So the Royals we've talked about this a lot. There was so much serendipity in their winning when they did, and part of it simply is what they did in so many ways. So the offense, the pitching, was not possible in the baseball of even 3 or 4 years later. And the game has evolved, and they have to evolve with it. So yes, I mean, I think they should absolutely trade Scott Barlow. I don't think they will, but I think they absolutely should. I mean, Benintendi, kind of a no-brainer. I think, we're already seeing rumors. I think, again, it's already July. There's no reason to wait. They should have traded him a month ago. He's not hitting for much power, but in the offensive levels of 2022, a 300 hitter who gets on base at a 370 clip, even as a left fielder, doesn't have to hit for a lot of power to be a well above average hitter. I think they will get I hope they get one decent, maybe borderline top 100 prospect. They should get somebody obviously better for him than they did for Carlos Santana, but don't spread the wealth and get 3 or 4, guys who might be a reliever one day. Get one, top 200 prospect.
And you know what I don't want? I mean, and I know it worked out with the Lorenzo Cain and Alcides Escobar, but I don't want to see somebody who's, had a cup of coffee and had to get sent back down already coming over. I want someone who's been nowhere near the big leagues. You're not. This is not trending like you're going to be an 85 win team next year. You're trending to a 70-something win team next year. So get somebody that's a couple of years away. They just love and adore getting guys that are knocking on the door of the big leagues, and those are
guys who have
kind
of a post-type player. Right? Lorenzo Cain was a guy who just reached the majors. Escobar was a post-type guy where he was a top 20 prospect the year before, but had a flat rookie season. And that worked out so well. They've been trying to replicate that model ever since. I don't mind it if they actually give the new guy a chance to succeed. I mean, you think about what they got from Mike Moustakas, because that's sort of a very good comp here, where they got 2 guys who had already been in the major leagues and, had the shine was off of them, but still maybe could contribute in some role. Brett Phillips and Jorge Lopez, right? Well, Brett Phillips, despite really not being much of a hitter, is such an elite defender that, like, he is, like, the Rays love that guy. Like, he is on that team. It's not just his personality. His defense is so elite that they put up with his offensive misgivings. He's a valuable fourth outfielder. Jorge Lopez is like the closer and a good closer for the Orioles. Like, he's probably a guy the Orioles could turn around and trade to get a lot of talent for. But guess what? The Royals gave up on both of those guys before they had a chance to succeed. Phillips, I don't know why they gave up on. They traded him for a nobody prospect who I think never played for the Royals. And Lopez, they refused. He had the misfortune of almost throwing a perfect game as a starter for the Royals. He threw 8 perfect innings, the longest any Royals ever gone with a perfect game. And because of that, they just stubbornly insisted on continuing to use him as a starter. and never gave him enough of a chance to adapt to the bullpen, despite the fact that he had good stuff. They gave up on him. The Orioles themselves took them too long to move him, but if they finally didn't, and he's turned into a valuable player. So the point is, the Royals may have identified talent there, and Mike Moustakas was not going to bring back an elite guy at that point, but they didn't give those guys the chance to shine.
No, they didn't. And Phillips had to be moved because of the overwhelming wave of talented outfield prospects that were roaring down upon the organization. That's why they had to do that. I will say, though, Edward Olivares, a guy that we've talked about a number of times in this podcast. By the way, I saw somebody say, hey, pitching coaches makes a little. Why don't you just go check out episode 12 of the Kaufman Corner podcast where we did talk about that. That was a big part of it if you missed that last week. But on Edward Olivares, you mentioned the Trevor Rosenthal trade that brought Olivares in. Olivares here, and I mentioned Pasquantino, whose numbers, haven't been great. He's at least drawing walks. He drew 2 more walks today. He's kept that part of his game together. But between Olivares and Pasquantino, I mean, you should be empowered that you can play young guys and make this thing happen. Is there anybody on the horizon that is the next guy to add to the mix? Right? If Benintendi goes, I think it's just more at bats for guys that are already here.
Right.
Is probably the reality on that one. But is there, Prado's not looking like he's ready to come up and join Pasquantino the way they've been playing together down in AAA. Anyone you point to and say, okay, let's get this guy here because he's definitely ready?
Yes, potentially there is. It's actually the guy I wanted to kind of bring up in our minor league minute, which we can do now.
Right now.
Our first repeat featured player here, and that's Michael Massey, who, as we talked about when he was in Double-A, and hit well there at 305 with 359 on base, 496 slugging. This is 4th round pick 3 years ago, and was had a reputation coming out of the draft as a heady player, but nobody expected him for this kind of power. It hit 21 home runs last year, and then this year hit 9 in Northwest Arkansas. Then got promoted to Omaha 3 weeks ago, and coming into today in 17 games, 333, 392, 652. 5 doubles and 5 home runs and 6 doubles in 17 AAA games. For the season, an 898 OPS. He's a second baseman, and in 168 minor league games has made a total of 8 errors, which is a good number at the major league level, but minor league fielding percentage is much lower in the minor leagues because the field quality is just worse. Usually, ground balls will hit pebbles or just take bad hops more in the minors. So Rawlings has the minor league Gold Glove winner award, and he actually won the minor league Gold Glove at second base last year. But what's really interesting is this week he made his pro debut at third base. He's played 2 games at third base. He's also made 2 errors at third base, so that's not going very well. But this may be actually a situation where the fact that they're trying him at third base is a sign the Royals are taking him seriously as part of the future, because they're trying to figure out where they can fit his bat in. And to get around to where this fits is, we talked about Barlow, but the guy they really need to move, if they can get anything for him, is Whit Merrifield. And I think Massey could be that guy. Just, like you said, they've had success with Whit, Melendez, Pasquantino, Olivares. Could Massey be a 5th rookie or near rookie to enter their lineup this year? I think he might.
And can I just say that what's wrong with trading Nicky Lopez? Right. I know you say, well, there's not,
because the value is not there right now.
Right, okay. And I get that, but he is an elite defender, right? And who did hit 300 last year and has a pedigree of being a high average and high on base guy and knowing the strike zone. I agree. You're not going to get top dollar on him, but he appears to be more like, if you're trying to get the value of what he produced last year, you're the fool. And nobody would have given you value based upon what he did last year anyway, because he projects to be somewhere between last year and this year. So if you can get a little more than this year, how about make it fit? Again, why are you moving? So Mondesi can't stay on the field, so they moved the shortstop prospect to third. Lopez can't consistently hit, but they're going to move Massey to third. Like, move some of the guys where you have duplication. That's what good teams do.
I 100%
or move Massey for somebody who can play at the big league level.
I mean, I think, to me, why you would move Massey to third base when they've actually been playing Nicky Lopez at third base, to me, I would keep Massey where he is. Lopez, if you want to play him at third base and see if the bat comes around, I would do that. I just think trading him when you have Whit Merrifield on the team, it would seem silly to trade Nicky Lopez when
Trade them both.
well, if you could trade them both, great. I think why don't we just trade the whole organization? I mean, at this point, I'm ready to burn it down.
But to your point, you really don't need to because Vinny Pasquantino, MJ Melendez, Edward Olivares is starting to hit. Isbel shows moments. Like there are young guys that are doing things to be appreciated. And obviously Bobby Wood Jr. goes without saying. So I apologize. I don't, if anybody's like, what the hell? Yes, Bobby Wood Jr. I mean, there are reasons to believe that there are good pieces coming together. So finish the team off. Like, when is the time that you're going to make this team fit? Right? I mean, they moved to Alex Gordon before Mike Moustakas had ever established himself. And it's like, well, we knew Mike Moustakas was going to be good. Well, you had to send him down like 2 more times. I mean, it took, we were at the magic 1,500 at bat mark, looking at our watch going, I don't know if this one's going to work. And we were laughing about Ned Yost saying, we've never been wrong on a guy, right? Like I did those shows. So, if you can move Alex Gordon out and I'm left with nothing other than like, why is Alex Zumwalt, in the mix that he is, and he's doing a fine job, and I'm glad he's where he is, but because he was drafted by the Braves and they know him from the Braves days. And why was Alex Gordon? Why were they so ready to move Alex Gordon? Because Howard Baird drafted him. Their picks get a free pass forever. See Mondesi. But Alex Gordon, who was by far a better prospect, I believe, than Mondesi was when he entered the organization. I know they gave good money for Mondesi down there, but Alex Gordon was the reigning college player of the year, and they had no problem dispatching him to left field. And now, like that never happens. It's staggering to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say because I don't have any counter argument for you. I mean, yes, the Royals should be. I mean, but if they're not willing to do the common sense stuff, like again, trade with Merrifield when he is, has tremendous trade value 2 years ago, even last year, on a team going nowhere. This sort of second level. Let's graduate from baseball roster management 101 before we take a grad level course. We're talking grad level stuff, and the Royals still are repeating remedial freshman basic concepts. Trade guys who have value now when you suck for players who might have value later when you don't suck. It's not a hard concept, but they just, their loyalty, the loyalty that they have to their players supersedes the loyalty they have to the organization as a whole, to the fan base, to put a winner on the field. The loyalty to particular coaches or, people in the organization because they want to do right by their people. That's a noble pursuit, noble concept, but it should never supersede the loyalty to building a winning team. And that is something that that this front office has kind of always struggled with. They mean well, they're good people, but sometimes being a good baseball person means making tough decisions and having difficult conversations with people in your employ.
I do want to highlight, Cam said it's like they're gathering ingredients, but never making a cake. I agree with that. And then, I want to give a little attention to this. And by the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live 10 p.m. Central. You can catch the stream and be in the chat room on YouTube, Twitch, and on Facebook. Cotman said, has anyone noticed that when MJ became a full-time catcher, his offensive production has dropped? Matt said,
I've noticed. Yes, I have noticed.
Yeah, small sample size, but noted is what Matt said. And I do, I do think that that's of note. Right. But also he was hot. It could just be coincidence, a cold streak. I mean, like, he's not going to stay red hot all the time.
Right. I mean, look, even if it is affecting, they need to play him there. They need to take advantage of this injury to Salvi and find out, can he catch? But yes, it's obviously he has the most value if he can hit and catch simultaneously.
And I think the comments here that Chris is talking about, he talking about John Sherman's comments from last week, status quo is not acceptable. Is the one that's been bandied about, and it was the gist of his comments. I kind of thought of us as a team that had a chance to maybe hover around 500. That's what I'm looking for, that first step. I've got confidence that we can get to the promised land, but we've got to take that first step. He said the results are disappointing. Status quo is not acceptable. So, yes, I think that is a statement that, he's aware of it, and he knows that at the very least he's got to tell the fans, I see what's going on. Right? It's not. And listen, I'm going to tell you, I've spoken to a number of the ownerships, members of the ownership group. They're competitive people. Okay, they're not just asleep at the wheel, and I think that's one thing that's going to be very different. I'm not telling you that they're going to fire Dayton Moore or they're going to make him change this or that. I don't know that will happen yet, but if it doesn't happen this year, it will happen soon, because it is there's they listen to the radio. They read the newspapers. They're aware of what's being said in Kansas City. They're not in Arkansas, right? With isolated and insulated from the frustrations of the fans. They're out,
and they want
a
stadium built, downtown probably in the next 5 to 10 years. So yes.
Yeah. They're in the stadium. They're aware of what's going on. I did want to note, just for a positive, before we go, Jackson Kowar pitching well out of the bullpen, which this has always been a pet peeve for me. I've always felt like it's a good thing to break a starter in where he only sees, guys one time, and I think there's some guys that need to be labeled. To me, you're a 9-batter guy. You're an 18-batter guy. You're a 27-batter guy. Like, there's only a handful of guys. That's why, like, the whole Brady Singer thing, like, sometimes we're trying to get him to go deep. We need him to be able to go to the 7th or 8th inning. And then, like, why they think Chris Bubich should be that guy. Bubich should be 18 batters in the door, but yet they run him out there at times. I don't get it. But Jackson Kowar, as a reliever, looks pretty good.
He does. And I would say, yeah, every pitcher in baseball, like if you have the luxury of breaking in a pitcher in the bullpen first, there's almost never a downside to it. Like, the nature of pitching, which we have really come to understand over the last 20 years or so, is that all pitchers throw harder coming out of the bullpen. It's just it's a fact of life, and that fact has changed the way the game has been played, because starting pitchers throw fewer innings than they used to. They go through the lineup fewer times than they used to, right? We talk about third time through the order. It wasn't that long ago when it was fourth time through the order that we were like, as an analyst, we were arguing about how pitchers shouldn't go through the lineup a fourth time. Third time wasn't even on the radar 10, 15 years ago. And what's happened is pitchers are never going fourth time through the lineup unless it's a no-hitter or something. But they're going, third time, and even there, you see that effect. And the Royals are still, I think, behind the curve here. Today, Brady Singer, 5th inning, he's cruising, and then suddenly he wasn't. And I think you'd hit the 18-batter mark at that point. Just to give you an idea, this year, starting pitchers for the Royals, first time through the lineup, 751 OPS. Second time through the lineup, 750 OPS. Third time through the lineup, 891 OPS.
Yeah.
Starting pitchers for the Royals this year, after they go through 18 batters, are allowing a 330 batting average, 391 on base, 500 slugging. So why are they out there? Other teams aren't doing that. The Rays aren't doing that. The Guardians aren't doing that. Why are the Royals doing that? If you have an elite guy like Zach Greinke, you know what? I think he can go through the lineup a third time. I don't know what his splits are. Maybe his splits are terrible this year. But both because he's a veteran, but also because he throws like 6 different pitches. And there's a lot of evidence. The more pitches you have, the less of a penalty you have going through the line. Because, again, you have more weapons that batter hasn't seen. Brady Singer basically has 2 pitches. There are 2 really good pitches. But he's got 2 pitches. So maybe don't let him go through the lineup a third time.
Well, and in reality, Zach Greinke has even more than that, because he has the touch gene. He delivers, he'll drop down, he'll do, he's David Cone-esque. If you got to be really old like me and Randy to remember David Cone, but David Cone, kind of had a slot that was out there kind of 3/4, but he'd bring it even lower and give you different looks and different arm angles. And Zach does that as well. And You got it. You never know. The Epis pitch might be coming at you at some
Right.
point. So,
I
yeah,
just looked it up here. Zach Greinke this year, third time through the lineup, 661 OPS.
yeah.
Right? Everybody else on the team, Brad Keller is at 764, Brady Singer at 893, and then Heasley 962, Lynch, Carlos Hernandez, and Chris Bubich all over 1,000 OPS allowed third time through the lineup. So, it's terrible. And if you took Zach Greinke out, who's basically a de facto, pitching coach,
Right.
it would be much, much worse. So stop sending, just I really feel like if we just eliminated that 5 inning requirement to get the win, a rule put in place 140 years ago when pitchers completed like 95% of their games and they threw from like 50 feet away, and the top pitchers probably topped out around 82 miles an hour. But if we got rid of that rule and the Royals didn't care about it so much, these guys would go 4 innings and they'd be a lot more successful. And the Royals can develop, they have bullpen guys. They could use those guys.
I totally get what you're saying, but I will say this, they haven't changed the save rule, and managers have gotten away from trying to make everybody into Dennis Eckersley, right? Like, you just as an organization have to pull your head out, right? You have to take your own head,
Absolutely true.
dislodge it from your own rectum, and then just do intelligent things, right? Like you shouldn't need a reframing of the rule book to get it done. And we've seen other teams do that. So, Rany, great stuff. Always love talking baseball with you, buddy. Have yourself a great 4th of July. As on the East Coast, it is now 4th of July. So we say that to everybody. Have a great 4th of July weekend. We'll be back at it next Sunday at 10 p.m. Central Time, talking about the Kansas City Royals here with the Kaufman Corner podcast. So for Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here in Kaufman Corner.